You're listening to Ancient Faith Radio, your Orthodox Internet radio connection.
Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. So grateful that you're joining us on this Tuesday, January 16th, 2024. Roxanne is actually helping our children out with some big projects they have tomorrow, so she's not going to be joining us this evening. But I just want to welcome all of you to our show. And if this is the first time that you've joined Live with the Louhs, the one thing that you should know is that this is a show that merges both faith and psychology to kind of give you some guiding principles to live by in your own walk of faith. And I just encourage you, if you've also been listening to us, do us a favor, share the show with your friends and your family. As always, we share this every single Tuesday, that if you'd love to stay connected to us all throughout the week, we are on social media on a number of different platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. In fact, all of our shows and sermons are all archived on our YouTube channel, and all of those are under the headings of The Louhs, and that last name is spelled Louhs. That's The Louhs. And you can find out more information about us also on our website at thelouhs.com. And also, finally, is many of you receive our daily inspirational messages. We started this several years ago, and we send them out every morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time in your email inbox. If you're interested in receiving one of these, we encourage you to go to our website. In fact, do it right now. Go to our website at thelouhs.com/subscribe. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address. And every morning at 7 a.m., you'll receive one of our daily messages. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're already receiving this message, do us a favor. Just share them with your friends and family. And there's power in the fact that of you telling people about these messages, about our shows, about the information that you're seeing and hearing, so they can maybe help other people who are in the same place that you are in, or maybe experiencing something different, but it helps them in their own walk of faith. So help us out with that if you don't mind. And finally, I encourage you always to join the conversation. We love hearing from you. And the phone number that you can call us in is at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Our producer, Matushka Trudy, will be answering our calls this evening, and definitely will respect if you want to make a call, especially about tonight's topic, and you want to remain anonymous. We totally understand and will respect that, and Matushka Trudy will take care of all of that when you call in. Again, that number is 1-855-237-2346. We're always simulcasting broadcasting of this show on Ancient Faith's YouTube channel. So if you feel free to leave a comment there as well. And you can email me during the live broadcast of our show by emailing me at ask, that's ASK, at ancientfaith.com. So friends, let's get started. Today we wanted to dedicate a show, as we do at least once a year, on our priest and really clergy and their families' wellness. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, we find this topic to be extraordinarily important. And so often it's easy for our clergy to smile on the outside, to tell you how great things are, and to give you a word of encouragement, to inspire you in your own walk of faith, which is what part of their ministry is, and to guide you in your faith. But many times we may not realize what's going on beneath the surface, what they may be going through, what they may be experiencing. Who is the priest to the priest? Who is the healer to the one who needs to be healed? We shared this several weeks or several months back ago on a similar show about some studies that came from the Schaeffer Institute that found that around 1,700 pastors leave the ministry, now listen to this, friends, each month, citing depression, burnout, or being overworked as the primary reasons. In addition to that, we see that according to some of the recent studies, 90% of our priests and pastors working hours consist of anywhere between 55 to 70 hours a week, and 50% of those who cited in the study are unable to meet the demands of their job. A Barna Group survey released found that 38% of pastors are seriously considering, listen to this again, very tragic, leaving full-time ministry, up from 29% just a few years ago. So today we want to dedicate a show to caring for our clergy, caring for our priests. We're speaking with Father Nicholas Solak, who has dedicated a great deal of his time and energy on this topic, and we're honored to have him here with us tonight. But let me tell you a little bit about him. Father Nicholas serves as an OCA priest. That's an Orthodox church in America. I know that many of you that are tuning in to our shows may not necessarily be Orthodox, but the OCA is one of the jurisdictions within our country, one of the Orthodox churches, a fabulous church. He's the OCA parish priest at Holy Trinity in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Has been there for 22 years. For 12 years, he was an adjunct professor at St. Vladimir's Seminary, and 3 years as an adjunct at St. Tikhon's Seminary. Currently, though, and one of the reasons why we brought him on the show tonight is that he's in charge of the OCA's Office of Pastoral Life Chair and the Program Director of the OCA's Thriving in Ministry program. Just so you know, Thriving in Ministry is a Lilly Endowment grant program that has established peer learning among parish priests and priest wives. Father Nicholas, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to join us tonight. So welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you, Father. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be on your show.
Thank you, my friend. And, Father Nicholas, before we kind of get started into some of the questions that we really wanted to kind of cover with regards to caring for our clergy, why is this topic so important to you? I mean, you're obviously spending a great deal of time. You're speaking at conferences. You're overseeing this particular ministry within the OCA. Why is that such an important topic for you?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up in a clergy family. My father was a priest. My grandfather was a priest, Orthodox priest. And my wife also comes from clergy families. Her father was an Orthodox priest. Her grandfather was an Orthodox priest. So we grew up in clergy families and, saw the joys and the blessings of that. And there are many joys and blessings, but also saw the struggles and the difficulties of that. When we got into parish ministry in 2002, we thought we knew what we were doing, because we come from these clergy families. But we found out that it's a very difficult life for clergy families, and particular challenges and struggles that we went through. We met other clergy families that were going through very similar struggles as we were, and began just to think, how do we do this better? I used to say that parish ministry is isolating, because I felt that isolation in my parish ministry. I no longer say that because I don't think that that's true. I think that it's a trap that we fall into. We allow it to become isolating, and that's not a good thing. But if we're not careful in our parish ministry, it can become very isolating, and then trouble happens and bad things happen. So I think, my own experience of growing up in a clergy family and being a parish priest led me to reflect a little bit about how we do this and how we do it well, how we thrive in what we do, and not just, sort of plow through it.
What do you think, looking back at your own childhood and being a priest kid, I mean, what would be some of the biggest differences, I think, for our listeners and viewers this evening that you may have experienced, those many years ago, and then compared to what your children might say now? I mean, would you say there's a big chasm between the role of the clergy from those years in the past to where they are today?
I think parish ministry has certainly changed from generation to generation. The type of parish ministry I have here in Stroudsburg at Holy Trinity is very different than my father's parish ministry in central Pennsylvania, small rural parish. We can talk the whole evening about how the pandemic has put particular stressors on our clergy, and technology has placed stressors on our clergy and clergy families. I think the administration of parish life has become more complicated and more difficult. I think there are cultural issues that we're all familiar with that have placed a lot of stress on clergy. So I think these things combine to make it tough sledding. But I think that that's on one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, we have a lot of things like Ancient Faith Radio, Ancient Faith Ministry. We have our seminary education. We have our bishops and our church and things that bode well for us. And so I think it's trying to find that good path forward in the complexities and the stressors of the modern reality.
I love what you're sharing. And again, for our listeners, you're more than welcome to join the conversation, speak with Father Nicholas Solak about pastoral and priestly caring for our priest. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346, 1-855-237-2346, or email me during the show at ask@ancientfaith.com. Father Nicholas, just harkening a little bit back to what you just shared a few moments ago when you talked about how you used to believe that parish ministry can be isolating. And I think for a lot of clergy, although I totally agree with you, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that, but for a lot of clergy, they do feel that way. I mean, they what would you say, what are some of the reasons why it can feel isolating at times as a parish priest doing the ministry of the church?
Yeah, I don't know. I recently heard someone say that priests don't have problems forgetting that they're priests, and we all know that we're priests, and we don't forget the fact that we are living into a high calling of our priesthood and our pastoral work. But we too easily forget that we're human beings. We too easily forget that we're individuals. And I think that sometimes we lose connection with just the social relationships that we have, family relationships that we have. We become absorbed, maybe perhaps, in our priestly work, in our parish work, and the work that we do is holy. We celebrate the Eucharist, we preach the gospel, we hear people's sins, we counsel them in their struggles, and it's such that everything almost becomes holy when what we do. Fixing the copier machine becomes like holy work. Making a bulletin becomes holy work. We kind of live at that high level of doing God's work for an extended period of time that I think leads us down a path of isolation. That's not good for us.
Do you think that the effects of the pandemic continue to impact our clergy? I know for us here, it was, and I think for a lot of clergy, those that we talk to and communicate with, they're still feeling the effects of that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how the pandemic, I know we could probably dedicate an entire show to that, but what are some of the ways that you saw the clergy impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think the research that you referenced at the beginning of the show, we're seeing a lot of that research come out now. The burnout in the American Christian landscape. I don't know how that applies to the Orthodox situation. I think that I wish we would do a little bit of research in that, how these things are impacting Orthodox clergy families and Orthodox priests. I think, though, that the research that we've done in the Office of Pastoral Life and just hearing people and talking to people, being in peer groups and listening, what we're hearing is very similar to what these research projects are talking about. The burnout and the depression and the struggle and the financial struggles that people are having. I think that the things of the pandemic are still being worked out among our ranks. I think it's changed us, changed the way that we do parish ministry. As I spoke about earlier, technology has added a layer of stress onto the work that we do because we're not all very good at that. The administration of the parish has become a little bit more complicated. So I think that some of the things that we are not really confident in or trained in or competent in, and because of that, it's ongoing stress as we come out of the pandemic.
What is one thing, Father Nicholas, that you think that most parishioners in a congregation do not know about what clergy are facing on a day-to-day basis?
I think isolation is maybe one of those. I think the economic challenges that we're facing, because so many of our clergy are carrying debt, student loan debt, seminary debt. They are coming in out of the seminary with that debt and entering the field below median income. They're oftentimes underinsured health care, and so they're incurring some medical debt. They're not saving for emergencies that come up in life, and so they're maybe accumulating credit card debt. So there's a lot of economic challenges that a clergy are facing. Isolation, long hours of work, and work is usually in the evening and the weekends. So that kind of disrupts the rhythms of family life, which one can do for a while, but when you're doing it for year after year after year, that kind of alternate work schedule places a stress on the family and on the priest. I think we're very bad at taking vacations, taking Sabbath. And that's something we need to work on better and talk more about, giving our priests Sabbath and rest and vacations and making sure that they're taking their vacations.
Mm-hmm. We had an email, sent us an email or sent a question. I just wanted to read it to you right before the show. It said, my question for tonight's topic is, what are some ways parishioners can care for their parish priest and the family by respecting boundaries that they have established? I know many families and parishes truly want to be part of the clergy's lives and their families, especially for happy occasions and celebrations. But how can they continue to care for them without overstepping? What would you say to this person that emailed us earlier?
Yeah, so this is like an issue of boundaries, which we in parish ministry have to get better at, setting boundaries, knowing what our boundaries are and establishing our boundaries. I would say that person having a conversation with your priest is important. We know that priests who experience training in interpersonal skills such as boundaries have a better shot at thriving in their ministry. So supporting our priests to get this kind of interpersonal training, if they are lacking in interpersonal skills, to give them the skills the training to have skills in boundary setting and conflict resolution, it makes them better priests and helps them flourish in their ministry. So I think having these conversations with our priests about their training, their boundaries, and letting them have the opportunity to set those boundaries and keep those boundaries. It's one thing to set them, but then you got to keep those boundaries. But I would, encourage people to have these. It's a great question, and I think having the conversations with our clergy families are important.
Yeah, and it's a question that we've gotten a lot at with retreats, especially when we're speaking to clergy. And one of the things that, just to kind of build on what you were sharing, Father Nicholas, which is spot on, is being very clear amongst you and your spouse, as far as the priest and the presbytera, as to what those boundaries are prior to that. Having that clear vision as to what that looks like, because oftentimes we can expect the boundaries, or what certain levels of boundaries outside, but the family itself needs to be all on the same page with that, and then being comfortable with what you guys are comfortable with as a team. Another thing that I think I've shared with a lot of clergy as well, to kind of just build on that, is, as often as you're able to, is insert sermons that talk about the Sabbath. And you mentioned that, Father Nicholas, earlier. I think just talking about the importance of everyone, how Christ commands us to have a Shabbat, a Sabbath, which one of the translations means to stop. And for clergy and their families, that's not the weekend. That's obviously, it has to come in other ways. And so really being very purposeful about speaking and educating the people about what your needs are, and it's okay to be vulnerable, that and sharing that, and especially using information that I know, Father Nicholas, you've gathered other organizations throughout the country, the Danielson Institute that we've talked about before on our show, about the what's actually happening with our clergy. I think it's important to share as well. So but as we're, kind of continuing this conversation, Father Nicholas, I do want to just ask, is clergy burnout a concern among clergy and clergy families within Orthodoxy?
Is it a concern among the ranks of the clergy? I don't think it's, I think it is. I don't know if it is urgent enough. Burnout's a hard topic to talk about. We read articles about it. There's a lot of information coming out now about it. A person who's in burnout oftentimes doesn't realize it until they're pretty deep into burnout. We know that most of the literature that we're looking at is speaking about burnout within the other Christian faith denominations. Very little data on the Orthodox. I think we are very, very blessed in the Orthodox world to have certain things that bode well for us, that help us. I don't know, one of the questions I'm interested in is we know that Protestant pastors and ministers are leaving the ministry. I think you quoted 1,700 per month, which sounds like an exaggeration, but I've seen that research. It's 1,700. I'm sorry, not 17,000. 1,700 are leaving their ministry every month. It's remarkable. I don't think that we have those numbers in the Orthodox Church. And I think it's an interesting question, is why we may be experiencing burnout, why we may be feeling burnout, but we're still staying in the ministry, we're still staying in parish work. I think that's a very interesting question. But if we are experiencing the symptoms of burnout and we're staying in ministry, well, is that a healthy situation for our clergy families? Is it a healthy situation for our parishes as well? So even though we may not be leaving the ministry, and I suspect that we're not at the level of the Protestant denominations, it still is a concern if we're pastoring parishes and faithful in our flocks, bearing the burdens of the symptoms of burnout.
Father Nicholas, is there any studies on the retention of children of clergy in the Orthodox Church? I mean, how many of them? I mean, you're obviously in the church, but how many of them actually stay in the church afterwards? I don't know if there's any. I'm not aware of any research. Are you of just how many priests' kids actually stay in the church after they've graduated high school or college?
I'm not. Yeah, that's another thing that we should be thinking about and looking at. I'm not aware of any of that research or that data. But I spoke with a priest kid last month in December, and he's in his 50s, and we were talking about this very thing. And he said, I'm 50 years old, and to this day, everything that I do, I have this feeling it's a reflection of my father's parish priesthood and his parish ministry. Even though I'm 50 years old, I have a wife and kids, my own life, my job, and that, I still there's such a strong part of my upbringing that was always a reflection of my father's priesthood and his parish ministry. I still carry that with me to this day. So that's, there's a lot there.
I'd like to maybe later on in the show kind of just talk about what are some things that you would recommend for clergy who are listening tonight or downloading this podcast. What would you recommend they do with their children and their spouse? What are some things that what are some tools that they can do together as a parish priest with his family? But, just getting back to, your role and your title, you're the chair of the OCA's Office of Pastoral Life. What are the main activities of the Office of Pastoral Life?
So the Office of Pastoral Life in the OCA we have a lot of mandates that we try to carry out. We try to encourage personal growth and foster good supportive relationships amongst those who do ministry. Toward that end, we organize national retreats of our clergy, and we have one of the things that we did during the Synaxis was we began to gather our OCA priests in quarterly peer learning groups on Zoom, just to kind of talk about what we were experiencing. When you talk about peer learning, there's like three different types of peer learning that we can look at. There's the kind of peer learning where you're bringing together people who have a passion for what they do, who are interested in what they do, trying to be better at what they do, and the focus is on practicing the skills that they have, existing skills that they have, and sharing with one another. Like, for example, for parish priests, it might be preaching. It's a skill that we already have. We've been trained in that. We're out in the field preaching, and so we might talk about how we preach. There's the development of new skills, and we talked about that already, like technology that's coming at us, and just administrative challenges, and the traffic that we're getting in through our doors right now with people who are interested in Orthodoxy and having to sort out where they're from and what they're talking about and what they're listening to and so the kind of development of new skills in changing world and changing context. And then there's the transformational type of things, where we're taking a look at our heart, our life, our marriages, our Christian baptism. So getting priests together to talk about their craft, their skills of being parish priest and the new skills that are there, and then just the transformational things that keep us growing in a life in Christ. So we began to do these quarterly, we call it a Synaxis program. We bring together our clergy to go into small breakout rooms. And we had one just in December. We had about over 140 priests and deacons that came and spent 2 hours talking about their ministry. Our big program, though, is the Thriving in Ministry program. We received in 2018 a grant from the Willing Government to do clergy peer learning. We've been doing that for 5 years. It's a program of clergy peer learning and clergy wives peer learning. We have about over 60 clergy wives that participate in their peer learning program, and then over 70 priests that participate in these small groups of like 5 to 8 priest wives with a trained facilitator. And this is a pan-Orthodox program. It's not just for the OCA, but we have participants from the Antiochians, the Armenians, the GOA, the Moscow Patriarchate, the Serbian Church, the Ukrainian Church. So it's kind of a pan-Orthodox program. So we have that, and we just finished our first grant with that, and just this month, January, we started our second grant with Lily to continue to sustain that program and to build from what we're doing. And then in the Office of Pastoral Life, we have a strong group of clergy wives who are part of an advisory group that do different kind of retreats, Zoom retreats, newsletters. They reach out and communicate with clergy wives and clergy widows and build that sisterhood of ministry among the priest wives in the OCA.
What has been some of the most revealing information that's come through some of those, especially the CNXCs, the retreats that you've had? Anything that would be very helpful for our listeners to hear tonight?
There's a lot of evidence about the value of peer learning, not just within clergy, but for all occupations that do peer learning. We've taken a look at how our program, our Thriving in Ministry program, has impacted our clergy. And one of the things I'm really interested in, and I'm really happy to see, I think this is really important, is that people who are participating in our peer learning programs, the clergy and the clergy wives, they're reporting that their relationships are improving outside of the peer context. So they're forming strong peer connections and relationships within their group. And then they're going home and finding that they are having better connection, social connection with friends and family and parishioners.
Nice.
And they attribute that to their participation in the peer learning program, And that's interesting to me. And I think it's important because there's research that says that the further along you go down the road of isolation, the more you lose the skills, the social skills to connect with other people. And so, if you've been pastoring and living in isolation for 10, 15, 20 years, you start to lose those skills to connect with people. Even though you may want to, you've kind of forgotten how to do it. So what we're finding in our peer learning program is that it's reawakening those skills, and people are leaving the program and going back home and making better social connections. I think that's a really positive outcome of our program.
Well, I think it's so easy, as clergy. I mean, we, unlike some of the other churches that are you have, one on every street corner. I mean, within the Orthodox Church, we're not necessarily always next to each other or near each other, and you hear so much of just this loneliness that happens because, we're told at the seminary that that there needs to be a separation between the clergy and the laity. That and sometimes there's maybe this unsaid rule. Nothing that was ever taught to me, but maybe this unsaid rule that that you don't share things that what you're going through with the laity. And as such, people, priests and presbyteras, their wives, struggle with, I think, that loneliness and that kind of feeling like they're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. What do you say to priests that may feel like they're experiencing that level of loneliness, or even the priests' wives who oftentimes are? I mean, obviously we talk about this all the time. Are they really the true heroes within the church? But what would you tell them, as to some ways that could help with that feeling of loneliness? You mentioned this program, which I love, the Thriving in Ministry. But I mean, what are some things that just on a personal level that they could be working on each day?
Well, we have so much to offer in the Orthodox Church. I mean, we really do. We have confession. We have spiritual fathers. We have father confessors. We have a spiritual brotherhood. We have spiritual sisterhood. We have each other. We have community. We have parishes. We have, feasting seasons and fasting seasons and the whole liturgical schedule. And we have our bishops that really care for our priests. Most bishops really do care for their clergy and their clergy families. We have a lot that's available to us. But we don't avail ourselves to it. We can sometimes even get absorbed in the negative research that's coming out and thinking, well, this is our plight. It's not. It doesn't have to be.
Right. It's a choice.
We don't have to be on the road. It's a choice that we have, right? But I think that our Thriving in Ministry program is not the only game in town either. We're hearing a lot of churches and jurisdictions that are getting into peer learning and seeing the value of it, and offering the opportunity for clergy and clergy families to get involved in this.
That's excellent.
Our program is structured that we do quarterly, all-day peer learning groups. So once every 3 months, when we're able to gather in person, they travel and come in person for the day, 4 times a year. But then we also have funds from our grant that we are able to fund a 5th session, extraordinary session, which is just getting the group together to do something that they enjoy doing. It's going to the theater, going out to dinner, getting an Airbnb, taking a night or a couple of days together, just doing something that creates a greater bond, a strengthening bond among them. And that's been really, great to see the friendships that have deepened and the connections that have been made through that.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. You're listening to Live with the Louhs. We are speaking with Father Nicholas Solak. He is the director overseeing of the Office of Pastoral Life in the OCA Church, and as well as a ministry called Thriving in Ministry. And we're so blessed to have him with us tonight. We're talking about how do we care for our priests? How do we care for our clergy? We'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And just as a friendly reminder, earlier in the show, we mentioned that if you're wanting to receive our daily inspirational messages, you can do so by going to our website at thelouhs.com. That's LOUHS.com/subscribe, and simply put in your email address, and every morning at 7 a.m. you'll receive that day's daily inspirational message. Father Nicholas, we received this email right before we went on the air this evening, and I'll read it to you. It says, how do we protect our beloved priest from problematic parish council member, long-standing church member? We have a parish council member who has displayed belligerence, hostility, and aggression during parish council meetings directed at our priest and others, in all caps, and an incident during communion with our priest by refusing the cloth underneath. Each time each parish council meets, there is this ill sense of confrontation and negativity as we brace for impact with that particular member after witnessing several outbursts over the past year. I guess the question is how do we protect our beloved priest from a problematic parish council member? I think those are things that I'm sure you hear a lot. What would your response be to, recognizing that obviously that person who's making those has some needs, but the way that they're going about it is wrong? How would you suggest that person helping out in that parish council meeting?
Well, these are tough issues. They really are, and there is certain. Father, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. 1 second, Father. Am I still on, Father?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. These are they're very difficult issues, and sometimes we got to know what's beyond our skill level. Given the parish resources, and that there are some people that we just need to begin to involve outside help and resources to deal with these kinds of situations, and that oftentimes means getting the bishop and the dean, the chancellors involved when these things are just out of control, that could be on our level to deal with. Now, we know that, and there was the research that came out in January of 2022, I think it was, from Lifeway Research. I think you've even talked about this Lifeway research in your program, that pastors who receive training in interpersonal skills just do much better in these kinds of situations. We oftentimes will thrust priests into very difficult situations with no training in how to deal with conflict, how to resolve conflict, and don't give them the support that they need to deal with a conflict in a healthy Christian way. So I think that our parishes, if we see we have these kind of parish situations that are difficult, that people are difficult, that there's contention everywhere, we have to equip our priests and our priest families with the skills to deal with that. And to not to do that is just it's almost unkind.
Yeah, I find too that, obviously getting some assistance and guidance on this. The emailer did share that they had sent a letter to the Metropolitan, and that they had thought that, that his assistant had felt that the removal of that member from the parish council would cause more harm and disruption to the parish itself, so that they were going to keep him for the remaining of the year. And that unfortunately, that's that maybe that's the case. But I think that the one thing is, that it's so difficult to do is just remembering to stay at our best. That at a parish council meeting, if meetings are becoming difficult and unhealthy, that sometimes it's better just to kind of call the meeting, to adjourn the meeting and take a break for an hour or 30 minutes, and then restart that meeting. And if it continues, then to not have that meeting, because if it's what you don't want to do is allow the parish council to be a platform to spew things that become really a show. And the sad part about this, and I know you feel the same way about this, Father Nicholas, is the sad part is that the average parishioner, we don't know really what everyone is going through around that table. And I tell this to people all the time, that we do a great job of telling people or showing people why they don't need to come to church than they do need to come to church, because of the way that we act in certain circumstances. And so the long-term consequences of that behavior is not just about this next year, but it's about really the conversations that are had at homes about what's going on at the church, the things that people are hearing, and it becomes, unfortunately, oftentimes can become the topic of conversation as opposed to Christ and what the church teaches. So those are just things that just to be cautious about. If you wanted to add anything to, Father, please feel free.
Yeah, I wanted to also say that we put these priests in very difficult situations sometimes, and we have to ask the question, are they, okay, so they're going to have to deal with this stuff. Okay, fine. This is what we do. But are they getting adequate rest? Mm-hmm. Are they under terrible financial stress? Are they compensated fairly? They'll be compensated exorbitantly, but are they compensated fairly so they don't have the financial stress in life? Mm-hmm. Are they taking care of their health? Now, if you have a priest who's in burnout or who is feels under a lot of stress, and then you put them in these kind of situations with difficult parishioners, and not even difficult parishioners, but just life, like dealing with people in their circumstances of their life, it makes it really difficult for priests to thrive and to flourish. So taking care of our priests is really important, making sure that their needs are being met, that they're being supported, that they themselves are practicing good self-care for their families. Then they can enter into these very difficult situations and bring Christ into them and deal with them in a good way.
What is your
clergy health is so vitally important.
Yeah, I know. I mean, just on a personal level, Father Nicholas, for me, I experienced a great deal of what would call burnout, if you will, early on in my ministry. So much so that, I love being a parish priest. I think it's for me. I finally feel in my life that I'm doing something that I'm called to do. But I know early on in my ministry, I mean, I could have, I don't know, 20 people say something positively, but if someone said something negatively about something in the liturgy or something I didn't do correct, I would focus on that one statement, and it would just occupy my mind for so long. And, I think going back to what you're sharing is, having the train to say, okay, look, people are entitled to their thoughts, and let's learn from them. If they're giving us guidance that we can learn from, yeah, absolutely, let's grow from it. But, how it impacts us, especially when you know that the people, in nonprofit work, I mean, you're dependent upon, the church growing and, and people's generosity and giving, obviously with God's grace happening in the parish. But, there's a great deal of pressure that, you just want to be all things to all people. And oftentimes I found in my ministry that very quickly I was just burnt out trying to be a people pleaser. That just became my focus. I did want to kind of ask you, though, a little bit, in your research and what you're finding, if we can shift a little bit to the caring for clergy wives, what are we seeing that clergy wives are going through, whether it be studies, whether it be through your synaxis meetings that you guys are having? I mean, what's really for the average parishioner? What do they need to know about what the clergy wives are going through?
Clergy wives are so important in our context. I don't know about other faith denominations, but in our Orthodox life, the clergy wife is so very, very important. Matter of fact, I've heard it said that as the clergy wife goes, there goes the priest. If the clergy wife begins to check out, it's not long before the parish priest is going to start to check out as well. So our clergy wives are really important. And one of the struggles that we have with clergy wives is that they don't have a job description. I don't think that they should have a job description, but we just need to know this, that what creates stress in a person's work environment is when they don't know what's expected of them. They don't know what they're supposed to do. Our priests have a bit of a job description. We know we should preach the gospel and celebrate the Eucharist and pastor the people and perform the sacraments. But clergy wives often have no job description whatsoever. They don't know what's expected of them, what they need to do. And some of our clergy wives, all of our clergy wives, are very gifted. Some are working secular jobs that are very involved. They're nurses, they're doctors, they're teachers, they're engineers, they're CEOs. They're college professors. Some are stay-at-home moms. Some have talent in music. Some have talent in teaching. Some have talent in hospitality. Some have talent in just organizing things for the parish and organizing volunteers. Some are very good at just telling their husbands, "You're being a people pleaser right now. Stop doing that." They're that voice in their ear that's so very necessary for a priest. So our clergy wives are really very important to us, and I think that helping them understand that they don't have to be all things, that if their talent isn't in setting up coffee hour, that's fine. If their talent is in music, that's where they belong. If their talent is just organizing their husband's calendar, that's what they need to do, and they need to be supported. And those are important things in our parish life, that we have these clergy wives that are doing these things for us and for the parish.
We are getting just a tremendous amount of response on both on YouTube as well as on our emails. Let me kind of go through some of these, Father Nicholas. Here's a question that was asked. It says, it's really more of a comment, but there is a huge income disparity among clergy and clergy families. Some live in fancy suburban lifestyles while others live in involuntary poverty and cannot support their families. Why are we seeing, this? I mean, I think what the comment is there's some validity to this, is that, you have some parishes where they're struggling to just, some priests I know are having to find other jobs to support their families. What do you say that? What would be, because obviously going back to what you were saying earlier about the income struggles, the financial burdens that many of our priests are experiencing when we graduate the seminary, we have a tremendous amount of economic debt and tuition debt. What would you say to those who are seeing that economic disparity between clergies?
Yeah, so we're talking about the research again. We know that there are, and this is again the American Christian landscape that we're looking at here, not necessarily our context, but that all we have is that data from the Protestant churches, that there are pastors and ministers who are leaving the ministry because of burnout, but not just because of burnout. Many of them are leaving, some of them are leaving the ministry because of economic hardship. And I think that we see that within the Orthodox Church as well, not that we're leaving the ministry because of economic hardship, but that we're experiencing the economic hardship that is leading to just financial stress in the household. And when a priest has financial stress, he doesn't feel confident to speak to the parish about financial stewardship, about giving, because there's shame that goes with that. My own financial life is a wreck. Who am I to speak authoritatively about your wealth, your gift, and your stewardship? So the parish suffers because of that, because the priest is under that financial hardship and the priest family is under that financial hardship. So I think raising the floor of our clergy's financial literacy is important. Helping them deal with their economic stress is important. Fairly compensating our clergy families is important. It's a win-win. That's the parish that's going to win, the priest family that's going to win. And it's a vocations problem too. As our altar servers and our girls in church girls see healthy priests, who are thriving in their ministry, it's impetus to get for themselves to move into ministry. But if they see their priest as stressed, as having a hard time, it's not a very attractive vocation to follow.
It brings up an email question or comment that we just received. And again, we're getting a lot of these comments, so I'm just going to try to get to some of these, Father Nicholas, before our time is up. This is a comment that says, I just wanted to say how nice it is when a parishioner will ask the parish priest and his family to go out for lunch or dinner. Or even just another woman in the church sisterhood will take the priest's wife to lunch or tea. I think it's so powerful. I mean, those small acts of kindness that a parishioner, will think on offensive. They say, hey, let's take the Matushka, the priest's wife out, the presbytera out for a tea or for a lunch, or just simply taking out the family for a meal. I think it just, shows a great deal of hospitality, but more love. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you were talking earlier about trying to be all things and to do all things, and the negative comments you just take to bed with you and you wake up with, when something goes wrong in the parish, you just carry that in your heart, you carry that in your mind. Having your people reach out with acts of kindness, that's a Christian thing. It shouldn't be spectacular. It should be what we do as Christians, is acts of mercy, acts of kindness with one another, and certainly with our clergy families, to show that appreciation, to show that support can go a long way for our families. It's important. But there's the other side of it too, Father. As you know, I mean, you've been a priest for a long time. Sometimes we can do without the sugar and the carbohydrates.
Yes.
It's nice to have a nice cup of coffee and some healthy food.
Yes.
We priests also have to be careful. When we go to make a pastoral visit and there's donuts and coffee cake and all the stuff that is not good for us to eat.
Absolutely. I think we have to, I think that's a whole other, like clergy health is probably another topic that we could really spend on. But
Absolutely.
here's another topic, and this is obviously very difficult to share, but it is a comment that was shared on our YouTube. And it says, we really need to address the issue of the bishop's role in these situations. Clergy burnout can often be traced to a lack of support from the bishop. And it cites Canon 59 that states that that the role of the bishop to take care of the priest when they're in need, and if not, that it regards it as he should be excommunicated. What are some things that I think the perhaps more now than in the past that our hierarchs are, I think, seeing firsthand what our clergy are going through, but if they're, I think in ways that maybe 20 or 30 years ago that we may not be having these conversations like we are right now. But what would you say to our hierarchs that that are small things that you think would be very helpful? Not necessarily what they're not doing, but what they can be doing probably more of. And obviously recognizing how busy they are, what responsibilities they have. They have a lot on their own plates, and we can also talk about their level and their work and their burnout and all the things that a parish priest goes through. Obviously, I would imagine the hierarchs are going through that as well. But what would you kind of share with just some things that we could be doing better at for our hierarchs that I think would be helpful for them to hear?
Yeah, this is a great topic. This is a big topic. I think by and large, our bishops have huge hearts when it comes to clergy families. And they are really at the ready to help clergy families by and large. I mean, you have like these bad experiences here and there, but most of our bishops really do care for their clergy and their clergy families. A lot of times we clergy don't avail ourselves of their archpastoral care. Like we just sort of keep it to ourselves, or we don't trust, or we have like those kind of issues that we don't reach out and say, like, we need some help here. But in my experience, when clergy families reach out to their bishops and say, I need some help, the bishops respond positively and helpfully to that. I think, we also have to ask ourselves the question, why are our bishops struggling? Are we taking good care of our bishops? Are we encouraging them to do good self-care? Because their job is important. Their archpastoral work toward our clergy and clergy families is very important, so that we need them to be in good shape and take care of themselves so that they can respond well to our clergy and clergy families. But I think that we can do better. We can always do better. Our bishops can do better. We parish priests can do better with our flock, with our own self-care. Our bishops can do better. but we all need to be working together and encouraging each other. Take your bishop out for a cup of tea. I mean, show some appreciation and support for our bishops, so that they can do their work and feel appreciated and feel like they're supported by the church.
Let me ask you, Father, we've got about 10 minutes left of our show. I really want to kind of spend some time, because I would imagine there'll be a lot more, there'll be some clergy listening to our show this evening, and I'd love to kind of share with them some ways that, let's, to check in with their wives just to see how they're doing, some things that you would recommend for us if we have children. What are some things that you think that, as a parish priest, we oftentimes say this, that, our first church is our family. What are some things that we could be doing better at, that you've seen?
The Lifeway research, I think, has a really gem of advice for us. Parish priests who speak to their wives once a month about their struggles are 5.5 times less likely to leave the ministry. Just once a month, speak to your spouse about what's going on in your ministry. It is a good thing. So that's important. But I would say this to clergy and clergy wives as well. Now, how I got into clergy peer learning was I was in a clergy continuing education about self-care, and the presenter said, for those of you who are married, your wives are very important to your ministry. There's no doubt about that. But your wives aren't the priests, and your wives, there's some things that you don't tell your wives because you love them. Like, they don't need to know everything that's going on in the parish and what people are saying. Or kind of keep them away from that. I mean, there's some things you do share, but there's some things like, they don't need to hear that. And he said, so you need to be talking to other priests, and clergy wives need to be talking to other clergy wives about the ministry. That's good self-care, is to be talking about the ministry. So those are important things, to be talking to one another, but also to be talking to others who are living the same life that you're doing and having the same challenges and struggles that you're having, to be able to speak to that. With our clergy family, I think that, first of all, we're Christians, right? We've been baptized. We're priests or not, we're people of God. We're faithful to God. And my wife always told this to our children: we're going to church now, not because your dad's the priest, because that's what we do. Even if your father was not the priest, we would still be going to church, because that's what we do, because we're Christians first. We first all steward our own baptisms, and we live in a Christian home. We're living a families as Christian families, and following God's commandments and serving Him faithfully. Priesthood aside, this has nothing to do with the priesthood. This has to do with our family. So you're not pleasing Dad. You're not doing this for Dad. We're doing this because this is how our family lives and how we function. I think it's important to emphasize that and to be located in that frame of mind.
What do you say to some of the priests who are worried about sharing or being vulnerable with other priests, because although we talk about this brotherhood amongst the clergy, but there's also a level of competition, or maybe even just worrisome about information being shared with people that may go, could undermine their ministry. I mean, how do we develop that level of not only desire to want to talk to one another, but also the comfortability to do just that with one another, with each other as priests?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one has to be careful. It's a matter of vulnerability. Trust is a process that has to be given time to develop. You can't just go in and expect to have trust with others. You have to test the waters. You have to, it takes a while for a peer group to really get up and working, and they do. That takes time, and they develop trust. They develop confidence with one another and safety. But those are important ingredients to peer learning, and there's important ingredients to a person's growth. If it goes bad, it goes bad, and that's not good. So taking the time to develop trust, putting the energy and the effort into building trust with others and safety and vulnerability is important, but it's worth the effort. It really is worth the effort. Take it slow.
I agree. I totally agree with that. Just in the last few minutes, Father Nicholas, how might clergy and clergy wives join a thriving ministry group?
So they can email us or visit us. Our website is thrivingorthodoxy.org.
Thriving Orthodoxy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Say it again.
Yeah, thrivingorthodoxy.org is our website.
Okay.
And there you'll find our email address on there, and you can contact us that way. Our program is nicely growing. We're up to close to 30 groups right now across the country, both clergy and clergy wives. Actually, too, Father, we have a clergy peer learning group of bishops. We have 7 bishops that are participating in our program in a clergy peer learning group.
Oh, excellent. So do the wives, all the clergy wives are together, and then all the clergy, the priests are also together? Okay, I see. Yeah. And is there a set topic that you guys tend to cover, or is it?
So
how does that
normally
work?
we do a check-in. We go around and check to see how people are doing in their priesthood and their parish and their marriage and their family and their life and their health is doing. So we usually do a check-in. That could take a little bit of time as everyone checks in what's going on with their life. And then each group is equipped with a trained facilitator who is prepared with topics to bring up and to facilitate discussions about their ministry, their life and their work.
Do you have
that could be focused on interpersonal skills? That could be focused on new skills.
I was wondering. So within the OCA Church, if a clergyman is going through a difficult time, would you channel them to come through this, or would they, if they're feeling loneliness, if they're feeling just levels of just burnout, obviously they would speak to their hierarch, but I mean, is this typically where most of the clergy would go through?
That's a great question, Father. That's a really good question. Our program is not a remedial program. There are some clergy that are in crisis, and there are places that they can go to get help for that. We've always emphasized that our program is for good parish priests, good priest wives who want to become better at what they do, who love what they do, and they know that they can grow in their ministry, they can grow in their priesthood, they can grow in being a clergy wife, and they want to get together with like-minded people and work at developing and learning new skills and having those transformational experiences that strengthen their ministry.
I love that. I love it so much. Father Nicholas, it's such a pleasure that you've taken the time to be with us tonight. Are there any other final comments that you'd like to share? Please feel free to do so now. I just want to, just for our clergy and our clergy wives, if there's anything that you'd like to just maybe encourage them with before we close out our show, I'd love that.
I don't think so, Nick. I think, Father Nicholas, I think it's good that you're bringing this topic up. I'm grateful that you're talking about this on your show. I know you've talked about it several times. It's an important topic. And I think that, healthy priests and healthy priest wives lead to healthy and vitalized parishes. And that's why it's really important that we take good care of our clergy and our clergy families, because it's taking care of our parishes, taking care of our faithful.
I love that.
Father, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much, and continued blessings to you and your ministry and your family. I really value what you're doing as well, so thank you.
Thanks.
So once again, thanks to Father Nicholas, and thanks to Matushka Trudy for producing tonight's show. She does such a fantastic job just getting all the emails, all the comments, the phone calls, all those every single week. We thank her so much. I do want you all to know that next Tuesday, excuse me, we're doing a special show dedicated to eating disorders. We oftentimes don't talk about this topic, and it seems to be so prevalent happening now in our society, much more than before. We'll share with you some statistics as to why this is so important. But if you or someone that you know is going through or struggling with an eating disorder, whether it be anorexia, bulimia, please share with them that this show next week, we're going to have some professionals on there. Roxanne will also be on the show to talk about these topics. But I just definitely want to let you know that next Tuesday will be a special show of Live with the Louhs all about eating disorders. We also want to just remind you all to take advantage of our daily inspirational messages. You can find them at thelouhs.com/subscribe. And once again, to our parish priests and to our priest wives, and really to all of you that are taking the time to listen to the show this evening, we're just so grateful that you're taking the time, because you obviously value our clergy. That's why you're listening. But continue to do all that you can to pray for them, to just watch over them, to ask them, as that emailer said earlier, just to see if they need anything, and genuinely ask them, how are they doing? And really maybe even add a word to it. Really, like, how are you really doing, Father? How are you doing, really, Presbytera, and engaging them in a positive way? And as Father Nicholas beautifully stated, healthy clergy wives make healthy and vital parishes. So thank you again for all of you being with us this evening. God bless you all, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.